Good morning, everybody. Let's hear it. Good morning. Let them hear you on the interwebs, right? Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Good morning. What I'm going to talk about today is what I've been asked to talk about is the message environment, particularly regarding the advertising message environment. And of course, in the context of health equity, what the whole meeting is focused on. And I think what I'm going to show you today is a little bit of what that case study we just saw is up against. And here's one thing it's up against. The message environment is vast and surrounds us with all sorts of messages that focus on just the opposite of what Shariki talked about when she opened the meeting yesterday. This is not a message that focuses on social justice or health disparities. This is a message in most of our media, most of the time, that focuses on individuals having responsibility for their health, which of course they do, but they're not the only ones that have an influence on health, and that's the message environment we have to pay attention to. The one we're going to focus on right now is the advertising environment, which is really a marketing environment that is broader than just advertising, as Anthony said. The FTC just told us recently that $1.7 billion is spent each year by food companies, mostly focused on the foods kids should avoid. And it's really taking us in the opposite direction from the IOM's recommendation to market what matters most to a healthy life. So this is a problem. And what I want to do is illustrate what this problem looks like and then maybe make some recommendations that tie back what the Institute of Medicine is trying to do. The marketing is more than advertising. It's generally understood as 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. And what that means if you're reaching kids of color is that you want to have products designed just for them. You want to have prices they can afford. They want to be in places nearby. And they want promotions in their own language. And promotions in their own language doesn't just mean Spanish and English, if you're talking about the Latino community, for example. It means icons, images, cultural connections that they can make. So I'm going to show you some examples of what that means. And we heard a little bit yesterday from Mary Story and earlier from Ellen about some of the data around the marketing environment and the message environment. We know that messages about food and foods, especially kids should avoid, physically surround kids in their schools, in their neighborhoods, and online. That is becoming increasingly important. Ellen reminds me that television is still the biggest influence on kids, but we know that the world is becoming increasingly digital, so television becomes one piece of a larger always on and personalized campaign. And I'm going to show you an example of that. Always on means that kids are in front of screens all the time, even while they're watching TV, and the messages are integrated in all aspects of their life. It means that their friends become what advertisers like to call brand ambassadors, delivering what now is known as content marketing, the kind of integrated marketing system that Anthony was talking about, where there are no longer divisions between what is advertising and marketing and what is the content that kids are using, absorbing, and sharing with friends. So if a message comes from a friend, the very little resistance or developmental ability kids had to understand the difference between news or content and marketing completely disappears, because this is coming from their friend and not an advertiser as such. This is important when we're talking about health equity, because youth of color are, it turns out, research shows, more interested in, positive toward, and influenced by marketing than their white peers. And Professor Sonia Greer at American University calls this the double dose, that kids are targeted because there are advertising campaigns that are directed specifically to them, and then they are also exposed to the general market. So that's what constitutes the double dose. And then we saw yesterday some of the data that Mary Story presented about the extra exposure Latino kids and African American kids have to advertising of all kinds. So I'm not going to talk about that in depth. I'm going to show you a little bit of what it looks like. So when we're talking about products are specially developed for kids. This is a fairly recent phenomenon. When I was growing up, these sorts of products weren't available. They hadn't been discovered really until the food industry needed to expand its market and looked and thought, well, what market don't we have yet? And they created a whole industry of food specifically for kids that look like this. And that's probably started in the early 90s, according to Jerome Williams' research. This is documented in the first IOM report on food marketing, threat or opportunity. So I think this is something we have to pay attention to. It's interesting thinking about this with health equity. It made me wonder if products like this that are a little bit more expensive make kids in low-income communities who can't afford it feel marginalized. So I don't know that there's any work on that, but it just raised a question for me. The other thing, the next P is price. So price is carefully targeted, and we know that from all products, not just food. I think that what's interesting here is that in public health, what we tend to call low-income communities, the food industry calls value-oriented customers. So, and they approach them that way. Then there's messages saturating places. That's what Ellen started with. And we know that from Tony Yancey's work and others that billboards are saturating especially communities of color. And I think what's interesting about this billboard, besides the fact that it's in Spanish, is that at the bottom left of the screen you can see the top of a house. These are in residential neighborhoods all over our country. I don't see them, however, in my residential neighborhood, which is primarily white. And I think that's a disparity we haven't talked much about and is a place perhaps for some policy and thinking where we could do a little more creative work. Also, we could think about sponsorship a little bit differently. Sponsorship is what companies do to expand place. So here's a way that you can think of place not just being about a physical space, but also the place of community, of who we are and what we say to each other and who supports us. And so the message here is about community. This is a message from McDonald's 365black.com site. The message here is that McDonald's is with you, McDonald's cares about you, McDonald's supports your culture, McDonald's is in your community. And at its recent shareholders meeting, the CEO of McDonald's says that it we have not, will not try to target people of color. And I'm confused because this looks like targeting to me. And the digital realm is an interesting one, and I want to show you a couple of advertisements because the thing about target marketing in particular is that it's for the target audience. So if you're not in that audience, you're not likely to see it. And so I'm going to show you a couple of controversial ads you may or may not have seen that will give us maybe an opportunity to have a conversation about the implications here. This is a quote from Jamal Henderson, who is from PepsiCo, working particularly on Mountain Dew, explaining that the new digital destination will align everything we've done in a hub for youth culture. It's all in one place, and it's dynamic, a transition from a campaign-specific approach to an always-on approach. And what they're looking for, he said, is authenticity and credibility. He said if they don't have authenticity and credibility, then they're not going to make it with the target audience. So what I want to do is show you one example of a very controversial ad that was, I think, a consequence of them trying to get that kind of authenticity. This ad has been, this was on YouTube. It was a series of webisodes that Tyler, the creator, a rapper, produced for PepsiCo. And you'll see, I think, why it was pulled off, but you'll also see the lengths that some companies will go to get that sort of what they're defining as authenticity. So let's see if we can make this play.
All right, man, we got them all lined up. Nail this little sucker. Come on, which one is he? Point to him.
It's me. You should have gave me some more. I'm nasty.
I don't think I can do this.
It's easy. Just point to him.
You better not snitch on a player.
No.
He's wearing the do-rag.
Snitches get stitches, fool.
Come on, it's the one with the 4 legs.
You thought you was gonna catch me? Keep your mouth shut.
No.
Keep your mouth shut. I'ma get out of here and I'ma do you up. Keep your mouth shut.
I can't do this! I can't do this! No! 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 No!
She's just got to do it.
You're never gonna catch me!
I realize I'm showing this ad out of context, but it's very hard to watch, I find. It's a series that was put up online. The situation is that apparently the goat wasn't served enough Mountain Dew and beat up the waitress, who's now unable because of how terrified she is to say something. When I showed this to my darling husband, he didn't know if it was more offensive to African Americans or more offensive to women. And my friends in the domestic violence world were equally offended by this. So I'd say this, in my opinion, is inappropriate marketing and goes way over the line and is largely out of sight, as is much of the marketing that goes directly to kids, because this was online, this goes to cell phones, it is collected in it's in a culture that I'm not part of, and that many people who are concerned about this aren't part of. And so this has big implications. If we want to do something about this kind of marketing, if we don't think it's appropriate, we have to monitor this very, very carefully. Now, there's another aspect of target marketing that's also difficult, because as Shariki has pointed out in the past, especially if you're talking about communities that aren't included in mainstream culture, when there are images in our culture, when there are messages, they get attended to very closely. And maybe that's why kids of color pay more attention to ads that include kids of color. I want to show you another ad, though, that is also controversial, but for a much different reason. And so let's look at this one, too, and then I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about.
Mom,
Yes, honey?
Dad told me that Cheerios is good for your heart. Is that true?
Says here that Cheerios has whole grain oats that can help remove some cholesterol, and that's heart healthy.
So a much different ad. Now, let me just tell you a little bit, in case you haven't seen this, why this ad was controversial. It's been called adorable. I think it is adorable. This ad was the most popular ad on Cheerios' site. It got 1.7 million views on, I guess it's YouTube, or on, I don't know if that's YouTube or their own web page. The next highest ranking ad on Cheerios' website got 100,000 views over 10 months, so 1.7 in a week is pretty good. And they had to shut down the comments. It was YouTube. They had to shut down the comments because there was so much vitriol and hatred in those comments about this ad. People called it, there were references to, this is according to Adweek, there were references to Nazis, troglodytes, and racial genocide. People talked about the ad being disgusting and that it made them want to vomit. Other hateful commentators expressed shock that a black father would stay with his family. And then on the other side, there were also comments about the joy people felt in seeing a delightful depiction and happy depiction of a multicultural family. This is from one blogger, Megan Hatchie-Mays. She says, "This is just a stupid commercial about Cheerios, but it means a lot to me. It shows interracial families and their children being normal and cute, not something to gawk at or question. Hopefully this commercial will lead to even more positive representations of not just interracial families, but all kinds of non-traditional families. To Cheerios, I give you one internet high five, and for doing your part to normalize families like mine and people like me." So that's what the message environment is about. It's about what's normal. And we have this difficult situation here when it comes to food marketing and health equity, because on the one hand, we have a message environment that primarily lacks information about healthy food. Despite the Ad Council's best efforts, the message environment overwhelmingly is about foods that aren't going to make people healthier. And the message environment also lacks information about every community, so that when kids of color see ads that include them, they attend to them more. So this is just a very tricky situation, and we have to take action about it. One of my favorite things about every IOM report is that on the first page, it always has this quote from Goethe, which I think is terrific. Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. And there's a lot we need to do. We have to monitor what's going on and get a better handle on these practices. We have to use the 4 Ps, product, price, place, and promotion, all 4 of them, to examine the effects of the targeting in the message environment. We have to research how the brand advertising and the content marketing in particular is affecting kids, because we don't understand that very well. It's brand new, pretty much. And we have to help parents understand targeting effects and susceptibility, including what we are learning about adolescent brain development. Parents right now think advertising is annoying but not harmful. So we have to change that if we want some actions to be taken. And that responsibility really has to begin with those who create and promulgate this marketing. The industry has to strengthen its nutrition standards for self-regulation, covering all forms of the marketing it does, packaging, sponsorship, toys, all of that stuff. Address the exposures, not just the expenditures, because this stuff is getting cheaper when it comes to your cell phone from a friend as opposed to paying for 30 seconds on television. And we have to address all 4 Ps. So I will leave you with that. Thank you very much.